Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I see a lot of friendly faces and names in the chat. For those who don't know me, I'm Stephanie Sandala. I am Programming and Outreach Specialist here at Library Link, New Jersey. I'm so excited for this program with Fabian Nicieza. Try to do that as good pronunciation as possible.
Muy bueno.
Wait, what happened?
Buen hecho.
Yes, I'm proud of myself. So I'm moderated by my longtime friend and a librarian, Christy Chadwick. Christy is an advisor to small libraries at the Massachusetts Library System, where she provides training, continuing education, and advisory services across the state. She's also an adjunct faculty for the School of Library and Information Science, yay, at Simmons University.
Hey.
She is a regular reviewer for Library Journal and has served as Library Journal's science fiction and fantasy columnist since 2016. So Christy, take it away.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I get to introduce Fabian. He is a comic book writer and editor who's best known as the co-creator of Marvel's Deadpool, and for his work on titles such as X-Men, X-Force, New Warriors, and others. He's the author of Suburban Dicks, a finalist for the Edgar Award for Best First Novel by an American Author, and this summer's sequel, The Self-Made Widow. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm going to jump into some questions. We're going to start with your books. Suburban Dicks and The Self-Made Widow are really an interesting intersection for me. I mean, you have traditional mystery plot lines in them, but it was the characters and the setting that really bring these into full fantastic color. So how did you develop these books?
The idea for both books actually germinated almost 30 years at this point now. I had the original idea for Suburban Dicks, including the title, the characters, the basic structure of the entire story back in 1995. I was living, and I'm still living now, in West Windsor, New Jersey, and we had an issue with a gun club that was on the other side of the pond behind our new construction development. The house Andy Stern, the main character, lives in the books, is the house I lived in from 93 to 2001. The gun club was there for 50 years. They were comprised almost exclusively of old townies and local farmers. 90% of the gun club weren't even West Windsor residents. And we knew they were there. We were told they were there, but we didn't realize how loud it was. But more importantly, we didn't realize that occasionally they'd be nice enough to send bullets our way, which they did with frequency. So after some of our houses were struck with bullets and bullets were on our driveway, one morning I went outside and there's a pistol caliber slug right on my driveway, like 2 feet away from my kid's bike, who she had left on the floor. And she was only a couple of years old at that point. So the whole neighborhood tried to stop them from outdoor shooting, not indoor shooting, but outdoor shooting. And we failed in the town. The town council voted against us 5-4. And it wasn't just me, it was a whole neighborhood. It was like 20 houses all together. And I had a really good friend at the time who was a writer, also worked with me at Marvel Comics at the time. And he said, in all seriousness, you know, I know a guy who burns things. And I said, no. we don't need to burn anything. It's okay. I will get my revenge the way writers get their revenge. I will create a fictional story where the gun club gets their comeuppance. And that was Suburban Dicks. It clearly very much evolved quite a bit between the original origins and the role that the gun club and its members played. It really de-escalated quite significantly as I developed it over the course of time. But that was the basic structure, and that was the basic reason and impetus. The second book has a similar real connection in my life, in that a very close friend of mine who was a co-worker at Marvel Comics passed away in 1996 of a heart attack. And he was in fantastic physical shape. He ran, he was vegetarian. He had a pre-existing heart condition, which very few people knew about. And at his memorial service, Black Gallows, tragic dark humor, a friend said, "What if his wife killed him?" And that saddened me. I knew she didn't kill him, but it sat in my head. What if a wife kills her husband and it's natural, but it's natural causes? How do I make that work? And that just stuck with me. So the sequel was baked into my first book 25 years before I even wrote my first book. So I always wanted that to be the second book because I just thought it was a good story that gave me an opportunity to explore the characters in a different way than the first book did. Suburban Dicks, I think, is more a plot propulsive. It moves forward more with a clear goal in mind, and the fact that it becomes a dual time frame murder mystery enables the characters to have to uncover stuff in a procedural manner that took place 50 years ago and how it affects what just took place today. Self-Made Widow, I knew going in was going to be different, and I certainly felt it as I was writing it. It's a lot more internally contemplative because it's not so much a who done it, it's a why done it. And it's not even a how done it, because that almost becomes kind of like just cursory information that gets thrown out in the book. And I did that on purpose too, even though I knew it might frustrate some readers, because I really wanted it to be about why done it. What moves you to be so unhappy in your life that you would make that choice? And I think Andrea and Molly Good are kind of the same, different sides of the same coin, in that both of them have an inherent unhappiness about their existence, and to them their existence is a prison whose cage bars are made out of daily suburban living. Everything about daily suburban living just grinds at each of them. They just have different ways of going about trying to reconcile with those problems. Molly, kills her husband. Andrea tries to solve the murder of Molly killing her husband. And as a result, I just think that the themes of the two books are different, but they all reflect what I hope further books in the series would do, which is to explore how we see things, how we do things, why we see things the way we do, and why we do things the way we do when it comes to suburbia in the United States of America, predominantly. A subject,
we'll
unfortunately, I'm tragically too well aware. I'm too familiar with. He says as he sits in the corner of his bedroom in the furthest reaches of my house that I could possibly get in order to get away from other people. This corner is where I wrote about 80% of Self-Made Widow, because I started writing it just when the pandemic hit, and I had 4 other adults in the house, so I had to hide as much as I possibly could from them.
Having a space to hide, I think, is very important, and I think that you're also very lucky.
It's not a great place, though. Honestly, it's a corner. It's a corner.
But it's a place.
I used to, in my old house, I used to have an office. I could actually go into the office, shut the door, and I'd be excluded from reality. But here, not so much.
Yeah. Well, as you said, it's really the characters and how they explore their lives are really important in this. So let's talk about the 2 main characters. You have Andy Stern, stay-at-home mother of 4 going on 5, at least in Suburban Dicks, and having all 5 in The Self-Made Widow. And then you have Kenneth Lee, who's a local journalist, but, he's kind of like, I'm not going to say down on his luck, but you can tell he's really dogged at his job and just doesn't feel like he's getting enough attention. And they're both thrown together in Suburban Dicks while investigating the shooting of a gas station attendant. But they're also connected by their pasts, both for the fact that they knew each other in school, and also that they both had situations that kind of made them household names for a little while they were younger. So how do you think that those entangled pasts really complement each other and drive the story?
I wanted their relationship to be perpetually, as adults, perpetually one of unequal status. Um, their memories of each other are locked in the time frame that they spent a lot of time together. Andrea was dating Kenny's older brother, and it was one of those young relationships that lasted far longer than anyone expected, because high school and middle school relationships justifiably shouldn't last that long. But Kenny and Kenny's brother Carrie and Andy went out for almost 4 years, and it broke up in high school. And that was a tragic to Kenny because he thought he was in love with Andy, like any 10-year-old would be in love with a 14-year-old, and as a result, each of them know that. So I think that their relationships as adults is forever colored by that. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form proclaiming it to be a functional relationship, because it's really not, and it's not meant to be a functional relationship. But I don't think either one of them are functional adults either, and I don't want them to be functional adults, because then I don't have as much fun writing them. So I want it to be one where each of them always think they're right, even when they both know they're wrong. And to me, that creates fun tension, because it allows each of them to claim some level of moral righteousness, even when they know they're wrong, because each of them are both too arrogant and too insecure to admit they're wrong. He more than her, but still they both are. And I just like it. I don't know that if I get a chance to do more books moving forward, whether their relationship is the central core of the books, because I think that if you follow each of their paths properly, there's a point at which they kind of logically have to start to diverge more. And I think that if I get to do more books, you'll see that happening. I mean, the series is really Andy's series. She's the main character. He's an important supporting character, and he drives and is very propulsive in driving a lot of the plot narrative. But for me, the narrative really is really kind of dependent on her point of view and her personality and her character. Almost everything, even Kenny's sections, are almost always in response to her. So as a result, I just feel I have more to mine with her than I do with him, at least within the context of the two of them together. So we'll see where it goes, but I think the second book went a long way, I hoped, towards helping readers understand each of them a little better, seeing where their kind of tragic past failures have led to them being the kind of people they are now. Each of them grew up in very different but equally dysfunctional families, and it really colored each of them having an inability to really comfortably socially interact with people and to have, I guess, what you would call a solid adult relationship, which, as far as I'm concerned, covers 99% of us. So, it's not like they're outliers or anything. They just tend to be a little more vocal and drop a few more F-bombs about the whole thing.
Yeah, and definitely, dysfunctional family really comes out in both of the books. But they also, it seems like those family members are driving a lot of the emotional growth and decisions that you see from Andy and Kenny at times. So Andy has her husband, who has narrowly escaped jail and lost a big portion of their financial status. And her children, who, definitely, especially through Self-Made Widow, you start to see a lot more of certain personalities come up with them too. Kenny had his mother, and in the first book, the relationship they have, he's like a satellite in her orbit. He wants to get away, but he can't break free from her. And then we also see Andy's parents in Self-Made Widow and see how some of that has come up for her and how it's influenced her family. So, what kind of foils and influence did you look at while you were creating the families here?
Because I created the characters a long, long time ago, aspects of them were me kind of cherry picking aspects of the relationships in my life with between friends, other friends and their spouses and their families, my own family, my wife's family. None of it is like a direct one-to-one kind of an analogy, and if there were, I wouldn't want to say it out loud because I'd probably be offending a longtime friend of mine. But certainly there are little bits of a lot of things in my life and experiences that I threw into the mix. I, I did not grow up in Queens. I lived in Queens for 3 years of my life, but I was really little, from 4 to 7 years old before I moved to New Jersey. I didn't grow up in a house in Plainsboro the way Kenny is, which is a McMansion, a 5,000 square foot McMansion. I didn't move to a house till 1973 when we moved to Old Bridge. But all of it is part and parcel of kind of like the experiences that I've had that I kind of just I kind of reflected back on what that would have meant if they were 8 years old, and 15 years old and 25 years old. I'm really glad that it took me 25 years to write the first book, because I think that it really gave me a much better perspective on what it means to have your kids and your friends' kids all grow up, all go through school, all go through the sports stuff, all go through college. Or, I'm at the point now, and my friends are all at the point now in our lives where our kids are almost all of our kids are all done with college. It changes your perspective on a lot of things. But what it does for me as a writer is it gives me a really nice overview of the characters and where they are. You mentioned that the kids are a little more engaged and involved, and their personalities start to come out a little more in The Self-Made Widow. Well, they're all a year older, and there's always a vast difference between 5 years old and 6 years old, because there's a difference between kindergarten, beginning kindergarten and the end of first grade is almost night and day sometimes for kids' developments. Who you are, as a boy or a girl at age 11 or 12 is often very different than the boy or the girl at age 15, and I went through all of that crap. I used to have hair once when I was really young. I've gone through all of it. So it really enables me as a writer to try to write my instances within the context of a greater whole. I know where Ruth is going to be, 8 years from now or so when she's in college. Ruth is Andy's oldest daughter. I know the underlying secrets of the middle daughter, Sarah, and how they're going to affect that entire family's life, in about 5 years or so, because she's 6 years old now. So by middle school, stuff's going to come out that's going to impact all of their lives. So I don't look at the characters as the moment I'm writing them necessarily as a whole. When I'm writing them in that moment, yes, of course, I have to really focus on what I'm writing about them and telling about them. But because I come from monthly comic books, where sometimes you could be writing a comic book for 70 issues or 100 issues, that's 10 years. It gives me kind of gives me a broader outlook on how to try to develop the story world. So there's things I threw into Self-Made Widow that won't pay off unless there's a fifth book, and there's no guarantee there's going to be a fifth book. So either I'm an idiot, or, this is the way my brain thinks and I can't stop it from thinking that way. You can't ascribe the totality of who a character is to the moment in which you are reading about them. Because you have to take a step back and understand that people do grow, change, and evolve. So what someone reveals to you at 13 years old may be completely different than what you believe about them when they're 6 years old. And that's why I love writing about the family. That's why I love writing about the interactions between the characters. Part of it is because I'm kind of being sly about, I know more than you do, to the reader. I'm writing the scene right now, but I know more than you do, and you're not going to know it for 5 more years. You're not going to care in 5 years, but that's besides the point. I got to think you're going to care, while I'm writing it. So that's that for me, that's always part of the fun. As a monthly comic book writer, you throw something into issue 8 that may not pay off until issue 24. That's 16 months from now. That's how I've always worked since I first started writing for Marvel in 1987. That's kind of almost how I've had to work. So not knowing any better, that's exactly how I applied it to the prose writing.
Yeah, and having that long view actually kind of goes along with where you have this set in suburbia. So West Windsor, New Jersey. Originally I asked you how you chose this. It's your town. I hear that. But
we moved. I grew up. I grew up mostly in Sayreville and Old Bridge. All of my elementary school was in Sayreville. I see we have Jennifer from Sayreville Public Library was on the chat. I grew up I went to Eisenhower School in Sayreville, New Jersey. I lived in Skytop Gardens, which is an apartment complex right off Route 9 and Ernston Road in Sayreville. We moved to Old Bridge in 1973 when I was in the middle of 6th grade, and I lived in Old Bridge all the way through high school and college up until 1988. My wife worked for the state government, and she had a really grueling, grinding few years between working full time at the State House and taking graduate study courses at Camden, and then driving all the way back to East Brunswick or Old Bridge when she moved in with me. So she needed a break, and she just wanted to live closer to where she worked, and where she worked was for the Jersey government, and they had offices in Lawrenceville. So I said, just get me somewhere where I can get into the city, because I worked in Manhattan. And she said, there's a train station down here. I said, okay, great, whatever, So we moved down to Lawrenceville, New Jersey, and lived there for a few years before moving to West Windsor. So I was at a house in West Windsor for 8 years, at a house in Plainsboro for 13 years. I see the Plainsboro Library is here too. And now I'm back in West Windsor again because we wanted to make sure we could manage our finances to enable ourselves to pay for the dreaded college tuition for 8 or 10 years. And as a result, we moved from Plainsboro back to West Windsor, and that's where I've been for the last 7 years again. Right. So I'm literally writing what I know. I mean, I'm trying not to be too coy about it. It's really a cheap and easy way to avoid having to research or having to make up stuff. I don't need to make up the mall that I know is right down the street from me. I don't need to make up the gas station where Satku gets killed in the first book, because I know the gas station where he gets killed. I know I can describe it because it's been there for decades. And a cute aside, one of my group of readers that I had read the first manuscript for Suburban Dicks, I had a culturally diverse group of readers read it, because I wanted to make sure that I was offending everyone equally. I didn't want to offend any one group more than another. And so I had a group of people reading it. The son of the gas station owner actually was one of my readers, and I didn't know it. And he told me, that's my dad's gas station. I said, oh crap. And he goes, no, he thought it was funny. It's all good. I go, okay. So I got to go ahead to set the murder at the gas station. For me, it's a way, right? Writing what I know lets me avoid the hassle of grinding my way through research or creating a fictional version of something, and I can then just focus more quickly and readily on character and theme. It takes some of the burden off of my back. I've written stories in outer space. I've written stories in Atlantis. That's more burden of work, to tell you the truth, because you have to create the fiction. I didn't have to create the fiction in West Windsor and Plainsboro because I've been here for 30 years. It made it much easier for me. I was worried that people might drive by my house and throw eggs at it if they didn't like the book. But luckily most of the stuff is in my wife's name, so they didn't know it. They don't know where I live.
Yeah, and actually mentioning your readers, you definitely did explore issues of race, of class through this cast, both financial status, social status, where they're living, how long they've lived there. Long and short-term residency all came, and it was a point that traveled throughout the mystery to kind of solve itself, both, you know, in the present and also in the past, alluding to the first book. So was it really a conscious decision to really go in and delve into those intersections, or did they kind of just develop while you were doing the writing itself?
You know, I probably honestly a little bit of both. It was a conscious decision for me when I originally came up with the Suburban Dick story to get revenge on the old white townies. That was part and parcel of what I talked about before, revenge on the gun club. They're old white townies. Sorry, old white people, but that's what you were, you know? But that is really very different than what Suburban Dicks became thematically. Part of it is the same, you know, literally it was a not in my backyard situation, except they had precedence because they were there longer. So they were saying, we don't want your houses in our backyard, you know, we should be able to shoot wherever we want because your houses weren't here for 50 years. But all of it became colored by time, experience, seeing the evolution of the towns of West Windsor, Plainsboro, little by little over since the 90s to today. The population just became demographically became far greater Asian population. The cycle, the generational cycle of selling the houses became Caucasians selling the houses to Asians, Caucasians selling the houses to Asians. And that was just a natural kind of progression. And I look at all of that kind of with bemused attachment, because I've always been this weird mix, fine line. I'm an immigrant whose parents spoke with a heavy accent, but clearly passes as Caucasian because he is Caucasian, yet I strongly identify as tan. I think I'm a tan American. So I've always kind of been on the outside looking in on all of that. And never feeling the sting of it too directly myself, but always aware of the sting existing. So I'm driving in a minivan, coming home from a soccer game one day. I coached travel soccer, both my kids for years. I'm driving in the minivan and I just glanced in the rearview mirror and I realized I had 7 different kids in my car and all of them had different cultural backgrounds. And I thought that was a wonderful thing. And that's something West Windsor, Plainsboro gives you. And that it was wonderful for me to see that. Then the way my brain works, I thought, well, they're not going to be like that as adults. You know, they're not going to have that same relationship as adults. They're not going to have that same easy, casual connection, because becoming adults takes all of that out of you. It just turns you into an ass. So I even in that moment, my brain was thinking about how we all become asses, you know, how we all become so possessive of our identity and our way. And I wanted to write a story that kind of threw a grenade into all of that, you know. And I thought that the way to do that is a double murder taking place then and now, which creates racial strife in the town. And we are a town that has racial strife, but all of it tends to kind of exist under the surface for the most part. In our town, because of our taxes, nothing is too overt. You don't want to pay the kind of taxes we pay and make it overt. That's just, you know, low class. So I wanted those bubbles to pop the surface just enough for people to acknowledge them, which we don't do enough anyway.
Yeah. Well, let's go back in time now, and we're going to actually talk about, you know, you are the co-creator of Deadpool. So how did you get started working at Marvel?
As with all things in publishing, a friend of a friend has a sister who works at Marvel Comics. I was working at Berkeley Publishing at the time, the sister company. Back then it was a paperback sister company of Putnam Publishing, which is the company that published my book. I had interviewed at Marvel and DC Comics out of college, and I didn't get either job because I lacked the experience that they were looking for. So when I heard from a friend on the softball team at Berkeley that a coworker of his had a sister who worked at Marvel who was looking for an assistant, I applied for the job. So that was 1985, and I was at Berkeley from 83 to 85. And besides the fact that it was Marvel, the main reason is because the salary was significantly higher. And when you're in entry level publishing, that means an extra pizza a month to survive on, right? So I was making $11,500 a year at Berkeley Publishing, and the Marvel job was $14,500 a year, which is like life altering. Let me tell you, you get enough extra money after paying commuting costs that you can literally buy a pizza. So I applied for the job and I got it. And it wasn't particularly a job I was that interested in. It was in the manufacturing department, but it was where I was interested in being. And within 4 months, I basically betrayed the poor woman who hired me and took a job in the promotion and publicity department at Marvel, hired to be the assistant of the man who was hired instead of me back in 1983, who was looking for an assistant. And he didn't know that he was getting a boss hired above him who was going to be a director of promotion and publicity and create a small department within Marvel to promote and publicize our materials. So within about less than a year, I became Marvel's advertising manager. My job was to create all the ads, promo posters that went to comic book shops, giveaways, sell sheets, co-op ads, a lot of stuff. And my job was to create the copy and the content for all of that. Work with a design studio to create the ads. While I was doing that, I started to sell my writing internally to the editors. All the creative work for Marvel or DC is done on a freelance basis. Back then, you could be on staff and sell your work freelance, but you didn't do it in the office. You really didn't do it in the office. You had too much work to do that you didn't have time to do it in the office. So little by little, I just started to sell more and more of my writing. And by the early 90s, I was writing 6 titles a month for Marvel, monthly titles a month, and I had a full-time job there. So Deadpool came about because I was asked to script a comic that the artist was now going to be plotting. That meant that the artist was going to determine what the story was, but because he was young, really successful, dynamic, exciting, energizing, brought a lot of attention and eyeballs to the comics. But he had very little writing experience, and I didn't have that much more, but I had more than him. They asked me if I would script the book off of his plot and art, and I said yes. And Deadpool is a character that he created in the first issue that he plotted, and the character was in essence a bit of a mercenary cipher. I didn't know who he was inside the costume, what his personality was, any of that. So I added all of that, and that became a part of the character's popularity. So I never call myself the creator of Deadpool. I call myself the co-creator of Deadpool, because the Deadpool was created by the artist who designed him and came up with his name, but I co-created the character because I stuffed everything inside him. And legally that became the case because he's the only character of that tenure that I asked to be listed as co-creator on the character agreements that Marvel signed, because I felt that I had done more than enough to justify asking for that based on why the character had become as quickly popular as he became back then. And that was it. So I wrote him a few times. I wrote his first solo miniseries in '94. Then I left Marvel. And in 2004, I got to write him again in a monthly comic called Cable and Deadpool. In issue 2 of that book is where I had Deadpool describe himself as looking like Ryan Reynolds crossed with a Shar-Pei. And Marvel's legal department had me change the spelling of Ryan Reynolds' last name because they didn't want the real Ryan Reynolds to get upset. Lawyers, they're so adorable. And Ryan Reynolds found out about that, and he was familiar with who Deadpool was, but he started picking up on it more and realized that he could play the character in a movie, and that's why he did that first Wolverine movie, which was really not a good movie nor a good showcase for Ryan or for Deadpool. But he was doing all of that because he had the hope that he'd be able to spin it off into his own movie, and eventually he got to, and all of a sudden the character became overnight popular after 25 years of being really popular.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, he's gone to the big screen, and you've written quite a few of his issues, but not all of them. So,
No, yeah.
When you're dealing with an IP like this, how is it to let go of something you kind of co-created in this universe?
I can't speak for everyone because everyone's going to have their own level of attachment to things, but I got over all of that real quickly early on in my writing tenure. I was fully aware that I was writing work for hire, and Marvel owned the content. I understood that implicitly because I was writing characters on a monthly basis that I didn't create. They were created 30 years ago by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and John Romita and all these other guys. So what kind of illusion do you have to have that yours are going to be any different than theirs? I'm writing Spider-Man. I didn't create Spider-Man. I got to write the Avengers, Captain America. So I kind of understood that really early on, and all I looked to do is create the best opportunity for myself to benefit creatively, financially, professionally from whatever situations I got myself in. But I never thought that I'd be the only person ever writing Deadpool. There's other writers who've written them better than me, maybe one or two, but there's other writers that have written them better than me, and I can read it and go, "Oh, damn, Joe Kelly, son of a, that's good," But I'm very confident about my ability to write certain characters comfortably, easily, and at a certain level of quality that makes me feel that it fits in with the kind of long history of the various characters that they have. And then there's fun to that too. You can write a character that has been around for 40 years and you don't think has been ever treated that well or written that well, and then you get the chance to do it and you think you kick ass on it. You write them really, really well. I wrote a character called Baron Zemo who appeared in the Civil War Captain America movie in a very different form, but I wrote that character for like 70 issues in Thunderbolts. I've written him more than probably anyone else on the planet has written him. And as soon as I was done crafting and carving what I thought was this really good legacy for this character, this really good showcase for how he should be treated, the next writer down the line just jettisons it all out the window and it's all gone. And you're like, all right, I don't agree with you, but okay, whatever, I'll do it to you one day, no problem. So there's a lot of people in the industry that have problems with that, and a lot of readers too, for that matter. But I've really not ever been one of them. There's two that I'm almost always about the next job, not the last job. And that's just kind of the way I've always approached my professional career.
That's great. Is there any comic IP that you haven't worked on that you wish you could?
Oh, geez. Well, I've written every single character pretty much that Marvel and DC has to offer. I've written over 1,000 comics, and I've gotten to write certain books even at DC. Well, I had a 5-year contract at DC, but I worked on a weekly book where almost all the main characters were a part of that weekly book. So just in that 1 year fell swoop, that 1 year weekly book, I got to write almost everyone, the DC has. So it's not so much getting to write a character that I haven't gotten to write. It's more, are there characters I would like to have had slightly longer runs or greater opportunities to work on? Like Captain America, I never got to write on a regular basis, and I always really would have liked to. Doctor Strange also. There's a character at DC, he's the second Robin, his name is Tim Drake, and I got to write him for a year, both in a Robin comic, and then he graduated to become Red Robin. And I would like to, I could have continued writing him for a long, long time because I really like the character. But DC did all these publishing things, and they basically canceled all their titles and relaunched them. But Red Robin wasn't one of the ones they relaunched. So poor Red Robin just, my book just ended. They gave me a different book. I was like, yeah, I don't like this as much, that's for sure. I wrote it for 5 issues when I quit. So At DC, probably I wouldn't mind writing Tim Drake or Dick Grayson, who's now Nightwing. He's the first Robin. He's always been my favorite character since I was like 6 years old, because the Batman TV show was on air when we first came to this country, and I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I didn't think I could be Batman because he was like an adult, but I thought maybe I could be Robin. That's kind of cool. I could be, yeah. So I always my brain always gravitated towards really liking Robin as a character, as a concept. So
But would you rather
I've
be
gotten to write
Nightwing?
what?
Would you
What?
rather be Nightwing?
Yeah, no, I like him as Nightwing better than Robin.
Yeah.
I like him better in his early 20s. I think that there's a lot more fuel there. But I got to write Dick Grayson as Robin, as Batman. He had one other identity. I think I've gotten to write him in because he was Batman for a couple of years in the DC comics, and I
Right.
got to write him as Batman. But I also got to do a flashback story where I got to write him as Robin. It was great. So stuff like that. I've written so many comics that I still love writing the format, but the actual concept of writing character A or character B doesn't hold the same allure for me that it used to. I'm 60 years old. I'm kind of over that. A lot of the comic book writing I tend to do now is different stuff. Like I'm working on an Image comic next year, which is a different sort of a book. I got a middle reader graphic novel proposal that just went out from my agent last week, and I got a call on it tomorrow to start talking to publishers about it, which was an idea I've had for a really long time that I just never bothered to develop, and my agent asked me for middle reader graphic novel ideas. So I sent him a whole bunch, and he said, "Oh, let's do this one. I love this." And I said, "Okay, fine." So I just started percolating it. It's an idea I've had for well over 10 years. It wasn't until I'm actually fleshing it out that I start to enjoy it. Because the actual comic book script writing process is it's so facile. It's such a part of me that it doesn't ever feel like either work or pleasure. It just sort of falls somewhere in between. But then as I'm developing this and percolating the characters and writing it in a tone that is a middle reader graphic novel tone rather than a Marvel or DC comic superhero tone, I'm really starting to get into it. So it starts to go from work to pleasure, and that part of it was fun. So if I sell it and if we sign a contract, guess what? It goes back to work again. The needle shifts back the other way. You're like, oh crap. It's very hard to be a professional writer for so long and feel like you ever get a chance to write for pleasure.
Yeah,
That's why I enjoyed the
definitely.
book so much. I enjoyed writing the book so much because the first one was not
Mhm.
written as work, because I had no landing place for it. There was nobody waiting to buy it. I just wrote it because I really felt I wanted to write it and get it out of my system and finally put the end on a manuscript, because I'd thrown away so many manuscript attempts. I'd thrown away so many prose attempts because I was so dissatisfied with them that I just wanted to finish one, and I did. And the fact that it sold was like, whipped cream and cherry on the sundae. The second one was under contract because it was a 2-book contract, but it never felt like work because book publishing contracts are so leisurely, it's ridiculous. I come from the world of monthly publishing. It's like putting out sausages every single month. To write a prose novel, you just get this elongated long stretch of time. So even though we started a pandemic when I started writing it, I was really enjoying the pandemic. It was kind of fun for me because I'm sitting here typing, and the process on the second book was much easier than the process on the first book, because I had some experience under my belt. I kind of knew where I made mistakes the first time around and how to try to tighten it and control it a little better. So the prose, I had very comfortable control of the prose pretty much the whole way through. Whereas the first book was a little more hunting, pecking, searching, and a lot of cutting after the fact.
Yeah. Do you have a contract for the third book?
There is
Or
no
more
contract
books?
for a third book yet. There is no, but that doesn't mean there won't be. I actually talked to my editor today. They are going to have discussions internally about a bunch of different things, a bunch of different books. The the first book sold well, but not great. The second book isn't selling as well, but its reviews are as strong and its reader ratings are as strong. They know that the readers who are connecting with it are really enjoying it, but they're having a trouble, like all book publishers are having trouble, that if you don't get hooked up with a book club, if Oprah doesn't pitch your book, then less eyeballs are getting on it. So they have to get the eyeballs on it, or I have to get the eyeballs on it. That just becomes a longer slog and grind. So you might end up selling a solid amount of copies, but it could take longer to do that. It doesn't all happen in the first month of release, which is what the book publishers want. They want, because they're putting out so many books that they want to forget about that one and move on to the next one. They want that one to be a big hit, and then they can just focus on the next one. I've been around for so long. I've been in this game for so long. Book publishing is a little different than comic book publishing, but ultimately, a lot of it ends up being the same. So there very well could be a contract with Putnam to do more books. There very well might not be, and I may still choose to do more books and find another publisher. Just don't know yet. I just don't know yet. I miss writing them. Let's put it that way. It's been over a year since I finished the manuscript for Self-Made Widow, and I got the third book already outlined and ready to go. I just haven't started writing it because there was no one to write it for, technically.
Right.
So we'll see. We'll see. I hope so. I had 6 really well thought through ideas and probably 2 or 3 loose ideas in mind, because I'm trying to do them thematically first. So I come up with what the theme of the book is first, then I come up with what fits that theme. And all of the themes are reflective of suburban existence. So I know really strongly what my themes are for my 3rd, 4th, and 5th books. But after that, it starts to get a little fuzzy.
All right. That's terrific. Thank you so much. My last question is, what are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? I don't even know the name of the book that I'm reading right now. I just got it recently. Hold on a second. It is called The Island by Adrian McKinty. I just got that a couple weeks ago at RJ Julia Booksellers in Connecticut when I went to do a store appearance there. I've been reading. I have a little bit of OCD when it comes to reading. So if I start reading a series of books, I need to start with the first one, and then sometimes I can't stop. I got to read them all. Although that becomes a little ludicrous when I start going, wait a minute, Sue Grafton did A through Y? Crap. So I read a lot of Michael Connelly over the pandemic, a lot of the Bosch books, all of the Bosch books, and most of the Lincoln Lawyer books. I read 3 Louise Penny books because my wife absolutely loves Louise Penny. They're not for me, but they're really good. You know what I mean? They're really well written. The characters and the setting and all just doesn't click for me. But I read 3 of them and liked them a lot. What else have I read? I've been reading several Lisa Gardner books. I'll pop in and read Janet Ivanovich here and there just to make sure that I'm not copying her, because I don't want to copy her. And she never really lived in the places she writes about. I do live in the places I write about. I just want that to be pointed out. She lived in South River, New Jersey, which is not Trenton. So I'm just bouncing around with different authors that way. My brain is so fried 9 times out of 10. I don't even remember what I read last week. Once I finish a book, like, I'm having trouble recalling that book. I didn't read fiction for a long time. I was reading nonfiction for a very long time, and I've started reading fiction again just in the last few years. But I'm probably reading too much of it, if that makes sense, because it's all becoming a glop. I find as I get older, I'm possibly getting senile. So I'm not remembering things the way I used to.
All right. Well, Fabian, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, hearing about your new book and the work that you have done over these last years, kind of hopping through different things. And I really appreciate, as our audience does, how sharing just kind of like the idea of based in New Jersey as a setting and understanding kind of how life develops from there. And then of course, all of your Marvel work too. So I want to thank you. And I am going to check in with Darby and Stephanie to see if there is anything else that we may have some questions, maybe.
So if you have any questions, we have a couple extra minutes. You can feel free to drop them in the chat. In the meanwhile, we'll do the big announcement of our prize winner. So for all of our summer events, we have a prize, because what's summer reading without prizes, right? Fabian, hopefully you win everybody ordering your book for their library.
That would be wonderful. If the library isn't carrying Suburban Dicks or Self-Made Widow, I really would appreciate it if you did. I just, the readers who are reading it based on the responses, like on the aggregator sites like Goodreads, has really just been consistently strong. Just really positive 4-point or higher ratings on the book, which is really cool. It's really validating. It feels good. And if you're a reader in New Jersey, you will recognize aspects of yourself or the environment in the book that you're reading when you're reading Suburban Dicks or the Self-Made Widow. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you will.
Or if you work, or if you live in a house,
Yeah.
or if there are people in the neighborhood you don't want to talk to.
If you have a jerk for a husband, there's all kinds of avenues to feel a connection to what's going on in the book.
Absolutely.
No questions.
No questions.
Order the book for your libraries.
Yeah, there you go.
I will be visiting each and every one of your libraries to see if the book is there.
That is a personal threat.
I have time to kill, and I got a Prius that gets really good gas mileage. Damn it.
Maybe that's a promise. If you order the book, Fabian will come.
That is a promise.
Can take a picture with him with the book.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
All right.
Sounds like a plan.
You want to close us out then, Steph?
Yes, thank you, Fabian, again for being here. This was amazing. It was so fun. I was laughing like a lot the entire time. It's such great answers. Thank you, Christy, for moderating. Those such thoughtful, great questions. I appreciate you both being here. And thank you everyone for attending. Just a reminder, this will be recorded, so you'll receive a link from me afterwards with the YouTube link. I know, shocking everyone.
It's recorded. I take it all back.
What? Surprise. Wait, like we're canceling everything. Sorry, no one heard anything. I'm kidding. So yes, but thank you all for being here. This was great. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Thank you, Darby. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.